Chapter 27, verses 1 through 65. 1. Save yourselves from your outrages, human beings of earth, and use the time that is given to you for your current life, so that you may learn the truth and follow the laws and recommendations of the creation. 2. You are looking for the truth of the creation, but you give yourselves up to a belief in Godheads and tin gods as well as in human beings whom you glorify. 3. Beware of any belief which you assume to be the truth in your intellectual conceit, because each belief drives you into the arms of the truth-unknowing darkness, which triumphantly hooks its claws into your consciousness and confuses you to such an extent that your thoughts and feelings vegetate away in continuous religious, ideological, or philosophical erroneous assumption. 4. Wake up and look into the light of the truth, so that you may tremble enormously in your intellect and in your rationality, which through your belief have fallen into narrowness, through which you cannot recognize the truth of the creation and its laws and recommendations. 5. Your narrowness of intellect and rationality does not concern itself with the effective truth of the creation, but rather, on the one hand, with your belief forms of the religious, ideological, and philosophical erroneous assumption, and, on the other hand, with the entire earthly passingness of those things which you regard as material values. 6. Truly, you swarm around the material things of your existence as if they were a golden jewel in order to take delight in them. But you are also like an insect, because you swarm around your material things like moths swarm around the light of the fire, and just as moths precipitate unwantedly into the fire and burn, so it is with you with your consciousness, the thoughts, feelings, and the psyche, which are harmed through exposure to Ausartungen and remain far from all truthfully truth. 7. You consciously shatter the truth in yourselves in disappointment and rage due to your arduous life through your belief in religions, sects, ideologies, and philosophies, because you disregard the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life which is given to you through the goblet of the truth, through the teaching of the prophets, and through which you can find the rise up to the light of the creational truth if you refrain from your belief conceit in a Godhead, a tin god, or human beings whom you raise up into idols, masters, sublime ones, and God equivalents. 8. And it is through your belief in Godheads and tin gods invented through people of your kind, and in human beings whom you raise up into idols and God equivalents, that you shatter the true love and create a delusive apparent love in you which you rapidly change into hatred and jealousy, as well as into wrong fairness, and which you use in order to go forth in your pathological craving for revenge and pathological craving for retaliation, in order to torture, to kill, and to wage war against all those whom you look at and consider as enemies. And in doing so, you have the audacity to lie that the love and fairness of your fabulated Godhead or your tin God demand punishment, revenge, punitive retribution, and war to be meted out upon your enemies. 9. Your shattering of the truth, the love, and the fairness is the living symbol of your far-from-truth Ausartung, by which the bulk of your humankind is befallen. 10. You bulk of the human beings of earth, you do not care about the cognizance and knowledge of the effective truth, because in your far-from-the-truth, unconsiderate doing of your hubris, you reject everything that complies with the truth and the creationally true life, in order to beseech, beg, and pray to self-appointed gods in doggish submissiveness, as well as dancing around tin gods that you have formed yourselves, thus bringing fulfillment to your own wrong and unfair wishes. 11. Again and again, however, you run into your own repercussion and create retribution for yourselves through war and hatred, because you recklessly repudiate the love and the truth and act in every respect against the creational laws and recommendations. Because truthfully you are embittered through your misguided belief and the false teachings of the untruth of your fabulated Godheads and tin gods, as well as those human beings whom you raise up as idols and God equivalents. You believe the lies of their irrational teachings which speak of godly love and fairness, but which, in the same breath, demand revenge and retribution and war against all your enemies, so that you punish, torture, and murder them. And thus the question arises, where therein is still true love and fairness. 12. In your malicious and ausgeartet doing of your ongoing outrage with regard to hatred, jealousy, strife, murder and manslaughter, war, terror, crime as well as lying, cheating, calumny, hypocrisy, and theft in all conceivable forms. You only create complaints, affliction, misery, sorrow, and destruction all around without you finding time for reflection or listening to a request for grace and true help. And if you do provide help and grant grace, then you do not do it in true love, modesty, and kind-heartedness, but only for your own sakes, so that you may assuage your guilty consciences. And truly there are very many amongst you who act in this wise without having any true thoughts and feelings, but rather only those of the selfishness and Ausartung. 13. Truly, many amongst you human beings of earth who let yourselves be incited through your desires. You find no time to turn to the true love and the creational truth and all the beauties of the creation which it has given to you through the nature and the life. Truly, you prefer to break the skull of your next one in hatred, jealousy, in strife, and in pathological craving for revenge. Provide murderous assisted dying and wage bloody wars, because the evil gives you joy and satisfies your murderous lust feelings. 14. You who are the abominable fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth, in your primitive overbearingness you think yourselves to be wise, naming yourselves God-fearing, kind, loving, fair, responsible, conscientious, and righteous. But truthfully, none of this corresponds to 1 minute iota of the truth, because you are entirely obsessed by the opposite and you lead your existence in Ausartung and licentiousness. And that you disclose your vast dumbness with your false assertions shows that. You neither know nor understand the truthfully truth, because you do not want to accept it, through which you are not capable of creating true love in yourselves either. 15. You who are the fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth. You are the evil ones and the bad ones amongst you human beings of earth, because you are the ones who wage wars and wreak tremendous destruction, who convey human beings murderously into the death through assisted dying, who murder innocent ones through terror acts, who harbor hatred, make jealousy and strife a part of your everyday lives, commit lying and cheating and all kinds of crime, theft and other terrible things. You have become troublesome vermin on earth which knows nothing else than obstinacy, malevolence, pathological craving, and licentiousness, as well as characterlessness and virtuelessness in the most terrible Ausartung. 16. Truly, you fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth. You are the complete ignominy of the humankind, and you disregard the norms of the humankind and of the life, through which you also drag those who are innocent in the things of the fallibility into the dirt and bring them into disrepute, just as you in your heinousness have fallen prey to the ostracism, the unhonor, the ignominy, and indecency. You vilify the light of the truth because in your characteral and human depravity, you persistently dig in the gloom of the evil, looking for spitefulness, guile, envy, anger, and rage against your next ones and against all righteous ones, fair ones, conscientious ones, and responsible ones, because they do rightfully, and they rebuke you according to right and law. You as fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth, you have long since lost the sight that would allow you to freely search for the truth of all truth in the laws and recommendations of the creation in order to direct yourselves upwards thereon, because you have become too cowardly to search for, to recognize, and to bear the light of the truth. 17. You fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth who ridicule the conscientious ones, upright ones and righteous ones, the responsible ones and fair ones amongst you, you mark yourselves through your doing and behavior, which also makes you tumble backwards blindly as soon as the light of the truth shines out anywhere. Then you sink without hope of rescue into the opening of a dark abyss, as a result of which you are totally unable to find the way of the truth in yourselves, the way that is itself the truth and the culmination point. And because you go into the unreal in this wise, you make yourselves into depraved ones who are sucked up by the abyss of the evil when you precipitate into it. 18. You are seized in an unescapable clutch of the evil out of which you cannot free yourselves without the help of the truth, and help can only be offered to you through the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life which is brought to you through the true proclaimers of the truth, as teaching of the prophets, as goblet of the truth. through the explanations included therein of what you shall do, and what you shall refrain from doing, and what you must go about and master in yourselves alone, through your own power, in your own will. 19. Make an effort to strive for the light and the teaching of the truth, and to find the way to the cognition in you. You must liberate yourselves from your overbearingness and from your desire to hunt for cheap fripperies of the evil instead of the real truth, which is equivalent to dear gold. 20. Do not continue to sink into the ruin-bringing horror, which you have given yourselves in your hard-necked greed for unfairness and evil, for unrighteousness, consciencelessness, irresponsibility, as well as for war and destruction, murder, and everything that is terrible. 21. But truly, you are little human beings who zealously strive in your ridiculous pattern knowledge, the pseudo-knowledge of the school knowledge, the religions, sects, ideologies, the politology, and the sciences, as well as the philosophies, and push everything far into the foreground, and therewith boast yourselves and want to shine. But what is all that compared to the effective truth of all truth, as is given through the creation and its laws and recommendations, through which everything exists and has come about? And you cannot obfuscate all of this in spite of your lies and malicious remarks, in spite of your calumnies and negation of the truth, because as little human beings you are too tiny to disrupt the machinery and the uncontrovertible existence of the creation, as well as its truth and laws and recommendations. 22. You can only disturb yourselves alone in your existence, in your life conduct, in your evolution of the consciousness, and in all things that make you to a real human. And you disturb yourselves to such an extent that you are confused, and you cannot save yourselves without the guidance of the explanations with regard to the truth through the teaching of the prophets, because you yourselves have no idea of the truthfully truth of all things. 23. Truly, through the traditional irrational teachings of a religious, ideological, and philosophical fashion, you have fallen prey to various shrub knights of the consciousness, false prophets, priests, gurus, masters, sublime ones, godly ones, and other worshippers of gods, and tin gods who even today attack you like robbers along the way and lead you into every evil, erroneous assumption. They prowl around the outer right path which leads to the truth in yourselves, namely the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life, and the explanations of the true prophets. And they do this in order to continue to bind you in the belief in a Godhead, a tin god, or an idolized human being, and to hold you further in the erroneous assumption of the false teaching so that you do not become yourselves. Do not bear the responsibility yourselves for all and everything in your life, so that you remain addicted in doggish submissiveness to your god, tin god, or idolized human being. 24. They pretend to you in lies that they are treading the way of the truth, but what they really offer you are only great gestures and hackneyed words, mentally dumbing down and dependent-making cult activities and rituals which they proudly and with prejudice present as godly traditions and wishes, the actual nonsense of which they, however, themselves do not understand and attempt to cloak with silly excuses. Truly, they are merely threshing empty straw and are spreading chaff with no grain, because they cannot find any actual grains in the entirety of their religious, ideological, and philosophical nonsense, which is devoid of any intellect, any rationality, and any explanation possibility, as well as the understanding. 25. And if you look at and consider everything, then you recognize that this type of narrowness is met everywhere in all religions, sects, ideologies, and philosophies, where their preachers, priests, superiors, representatives, and believers insist with obtuse persistency on pathologically silly words, phrases, teachings, and false, incomprehensible explanations. On the one hand, because they themselves have contributed nothing to the invention of the whole nonsense, and on the other hand, because, in truth, they themselves do not understand the entire higher rubbish. 26. There are millions and millions, indeed thousand millions amongst you human beings of earth who imagine that you alone have the true belief and the one and only right God, tin god, or idolized human being. 27. And full of doggish submissiveness, you who belong to the believers warn your fellow human beings everywhere in the haughtiness of your belief as well as in your imperiousness, where something goes beyond your intellect as well as beyond your rationality and therefore beyond your comprehension of the things Because an erroneous belief your intellect and your intelligence are suppressed with Goblet and enslaved through a religious, ideological, or philosophical belief that never ever has even the slightest proof power. 28. Truly, you fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth who wallow in the truth unknowledgeness and in all vices and pathological cravings, as well as in all terrible things and all evil. You are the worst amongst the earthly humankind, because it is truly you amongst all who are debauched and depraved, because, in your knowledge obdurateness, no upright, and in true love, no real kindheartedness, as well as no thoughts and feelings in righteousness, fairness and responsibility, as well as none, that are characterized by conscientiousness come up in you. Because truly you neither understand nor want that these high values shall arise in you, and that you shall live according to them. 29. But if it does not happen that you become knowing of the truth and recognize and comprehend your fallibility, then it is of no use to you if you fall into horror, complaints, and entreaties when terribleness happens to you through your misbehavior. If the terribleness of your fallibility strikes you, then you did not want it to be otherwise, and you have missed the time when you could have developmentally changed the whole of your fallibility, and you could have turned to the truth and followed it. 30. And consider, you fallible ones, that when the self-caused terribleness strikes you, then no one will bemoan you. Because for every human being, each moment that is wasted even on one thought of your terribleness is a loss. You who want to know everything better, although you know nothing. 31. And if you do not, in your hard-neckedness, come out of the truth unknowledgeness and your truth denial as well as truth calumny, then you will remain blind in this, and you will miss your true life just as much as your consciousness evolution. 32. You fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth who assert and suggest your belief in your fabulated godheads and tin gods, as well as idolized human beings with the slimily heinous words of your mendacious assertions, you only have an imagined truth recognition, because in reality you do not have a speck of dust of a weight of an idea what the truth actually is. 33. And you fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth, you who are in great throngs and who regularly or sporadically undertake your services to gods and tin gods, or pay homage and submissiveness to those human beings whom you raise up to idols and god equivalents or to saints, you are only doing this out of your belief, out of anxiety or fear of punishment, out of invented, imaginary necessity, out of usefulness and convention, or simply because it is tradition and custom. And there are some amongst you who merely do everything out of naive caution, because you think that you cannot, after all, know what the whole can finally be good for. Therefore, taking precautions might be better than suffering harm. All according to the principle of prevention is better than cure. 34. And those amongst you who are like pitiful researchers who fail their serious and real sense of research, you are rummaging around in things that are contrary to any intellect and any rationality, and consequently will not lead to any result or to any end. You believe you are searching for the truth, and you get yourselves entangled in a thicket out of which you can no longer raise yourselves up. Therefore you continue to rummage around in it senselessly, arduously, and untiringly, because you believe that you can find in it a way to the truth, and therefore to the creation, and to its laws and recommendations. And if you find nothing, then you excuse yourselves to yourselves by saying that everything is too heavy and too difficult as well as too arduous. However, your excusing does not help you, because you are not willing to take upon yourselves that which is heavy, arduous, and difficult. Therefore you only practice meaningless gambling with everything. 35. And that great part amongst you human beings of earth, those of you who apparently do not find the time to look into yourselves and find the truth of all truth in yourselves, the truth of the creation and of its laws and recommendations. You are verily plague created creations, because you believe that it is arduous enough to dedicate yourselves to the daily work and to the necessities of the material life, and all the things beyond that, as well as to the fulfillment of the needs and wishes that you have. In doing so, however, you disregard the search for the effective truth of all truth, as well as the evolution of your consciousness. 36. Truly, and as you chase after your material things, you do not notice that your requirements and wishes increase continuously as you fulfill them, because you always demand more and are not satisfied with what you have. And your unsatisfaction does not know any end, because you strive for more and more and are thus never able to come to rest, through which you also find no time to turn to the search for the creational truth, to which you do not use even one thought and not one feeling. Therefore you cannot awaken yourselves out of your wrong mode of life either. 37. You are caught in your wrong mode of life, in your wrong thoughts and feelings as well as in your sense for material goods, for possessions and riches, for pathological craving and vice as well as for pleasure and doubtful joys, whilst at the same time forgetting the high culmination point with regard to your consciousness evolution, as well as the search for the truth in you and in the creational laws and recommendations. Therefore you let yourselves be incited through your earthly existence, through your own requirements and wishes as well as through your desires, vices, ill joys and pathological cravings, etc., as well as through your religious, ideological, or philosophical belief, as a slave to your earthly requirements, wishes, and desires. 38. In the doing of this slavish bearing, you become fatigued and need diversion, rest and distraction as well as recuperation, as a result of which you do not have any time remaining to work with your mental block and consciousness block, resulting in a fading of your consciousness, of your thoughts and feelings, of the psyche, of the character, of the personality, and of the virtues, which is also the cause of the failure to deal with the life and death, so that not even a slight touch of an impulsation can arise for what will come when the life reaches its end. Only very few amongst you will perhaps once for a moment become somewhat thoughtful, but you do not let yourselves be more deeply struck by it, let alone be awakened by it. Rather, you push everything away in fear and shyness and reject it from yourselves quickly and gruffly due to lack of the necessary time for consideration. 39. Many amongst you who have perhaps once briefly thought about the death, you expect that others shall draw the conclusions out of life and death for you, because in fear and shyness you do not dare to deal with it, and even quarrel and grumble with your fate, and indict it because through chicken-heartedness you do not find the possibility in yourselves to direct your thoughts and feelings onto it. 40. In you, those of you who are so and act so, each word of the explanation is lost upon you for as long as you do not become courageous and do not want to recognize the truth and do not want it to be true. Therefore, it is simply up to you alone to change everything in yourselves and to escape from your chicken-heartedness, so that you may become courageous and turn in your thoughts and feelings to the life and death, in order to therethrough gain an all-embracing understanding and the necessary knowledge through which you can liberate yourselves from your fear and shyness. 41. You human beings of earth, liberate yourselves from merely dedicating yourselves to the earthly, material necessity, which in many cases is only based on imaginations and which increases continuously with its successes, through which you continuously demand more imaginary necessities and thereby increase your material wishes endlessly. 42. Truly, you have never satisfied anything else than your material wishes and never seriously searched for the real truth, although, paradoxically, you have demanded the effective truth since time immemorial, which, with the exception of a few, you cannot find because you are only chasing after the material and the fulfillment of your earthly wishes. 43. Since time immemorial, you have created hindrances of all kinds against the real truth which reveals itself as certainty and recognition of the reality, and which you can only find in yourselves and in the creational laws and recommendations. 44. You only indulge yourselves in all material things which you regard as a necessity for your existence, at the same time recklessly pushing away everything that might lead you to the truth, which many of you only find when you fall in a great affliction or when the dying comes to you. Turn away from the way of the exclusively material, and do not let the truth and the evolution of your consciousness be a minor matter for when you have enough time, a minor matter which you believe that you have sufficient time to make yourselves conscious of and to learn about. Truly, every second of the learning is of the utmost importance, because each moment of the not learning, no matter how short, is lost life and lost consciousness evolution. 45. You, however, you human beings of earth, if it does come about that you once again have a recognizable opportunity to deal with the life, the death, the truth of all truth, and with your consciousness evolution, then there arise in you immediately diverse extra wishes which you want to have fulfilled, but which are truthfully nothing other than pretexts and excuses with regard to you still requiring more time to turn to the truth and to the learning, in order first to accomplish this and that, in which case you fib that you will then be happy to turn to the teaching of the truth, the teaching of the Spirit, the teaching of the life. But truly this is merely a conscious lie. 46. With only exceedingly few exceptions, it is possible to find the seriousness by you human beings of earth, which essentially belongs to the necessities of the searching and learning of the real truth, which is pre-given in the laws and recommendations for all things of the life and all existence. And truly, you are still far away from this seriousness, because you make yourselves into depraved ones, and you do not search for the way of the real truth in yourselves, which is in itself the truth and the culmination point. 47. If you many fallible ones amongst you human beings of earth look at and consider yourselves in honesty, those of you who do not have the seriousness to the searching and fathoming of the truth, then you will recognize that you are like rotten fruits who are continuously spreading the rot about yourselves. Truly, it is a sorrowful picture that unfortunately corresponds to the truth and reality. 48. You disdain the seriousness of the searching and fathoming of the truth, because your belief in religions, ideology, philosophies, as well as in godheads, tin gods, and idolized human beings, makes you so crumbly that you constantly kneel down in the dust before them in doggish submissiveness and chicken-heartedness. Think yourselves into your submissiveness and chicken-heartedness, which, paradoxically, makes you once again overbearing towards your fellow human beings and all that which is creational, such that you assume to be better than them, whereas in the next instant you are complaining, entreating, begging, and beseeching your godheads, tin gods, and idolized human beings once again in anxiety, fear, and cowardice, for them to stand by you and help you. 49. Truly, the heavy load of the truth unknowledgeness and all consequences thereof, which you impose on yourselves, threatens to crush you more and more, and you entreat, pray to, beseech, and beg your godheads, tin gods, and human beings whom you raise up as idols for them to turn your torments from you and to clear them up, whereas you do not spend any thought or any feeling to bringing forth an improvement in yourselves and to turning to the real truth of the creation and its laws and recommendations. 50. With all your wishes, you are merely of the wrong sense, to direct in your striving everything only towards earthly, material things, whilst no honest thought and no corresponding feeling of an honest wish to endeavor a voluntary change comes about in you. 51. A voluntary wanting to recognize as well as a courageous admission and termination of your wrong life conduct, of your demolished individuality and all of the evil and false, the errors, the erroneous assumptions and characterlessnesses which rule and impair your life, do not come to your mind. 52. And if you find yourselves in great affliction, then you cry for the truth and whine and beseech, however only in cowardly angst and in the hope that help will be granted to you through the truth and that your torment will be brought to an end. However, this help will not be granted to you unless you turn your strivings honestly to the truth and lead your life according to it. You, however, reject your own longing for help from yourselves like venomous vermin, because you deny the truth and do not recognize that you alone can help yourselves if you find the truthfully truth in yourselves through the way of the truth, which is itself the truth and the culmination point. 53. If, however, help would be granted to you through the truth without you accepting it and leading your life according to it, then after your beseeching and whining you would immediately fall back to your old mode of life and into your old errors and continue to deny the truth, thereby poisoning yourselves. 54. Truly, it is only if you search for the effective truth, find it, accept it, and lead your life according to its laws and recommendations, that you will find the energy and power to finally bestir yourselves and to integrate yourselves into a constant improvement. To do this, however, you must turn fully and completely to the truth of all truth, which is solely to be found as certainty in recognition of the reality, and which you must search for, find, recognize, and fathom in yourselves as well as in the creational laws and recommendations. 55. In order to find the real truth, you human beings of earth must cast aside your submissiveness to your imaginary godheads and tin gods as well as to those human beings whom you raise up as idols. Therefore, You must also cast off your obdurateness towards the real truth and uprightly strive to consider the word of the truth of the true prophets and to use their teaching of the truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of the life in order to developmentally change yourselves and to exclusively form your existence according to the creational laws and recommendations. 56. An understanding of the teaching of the prophets, which is entirely given in the book entitled Goblet of the Truth, will, however, only be possible for you if you throw away from yourselves and destroy all the unmeasurable rubbish in your human consciousness which you have collected in your boastfulness towards the effective creational truth, as well as in your imagined understanding and your rationality, which has swollen into ridiculousness. 57. And if you really want to turn to the real truth, to learn and follow it, then you must start from the very beginning and be like the children, without conceit, megalomania, and imperiousness, but instead free and open in order to learn everything in a neutral wise and to process it in you, in order to become knowing and wise out of it in truth-bearingness. 58. Consider, if you are searching for the truth, then you must behave neutrally, because it is impossible to carry with you all the errors and erroneous assumptions as well as the belief forms regarding Godheads, 10 gods, and idolized human beings, since you must begin completely anew from the ground up and drop and forget all submissiveness and belief-driven simple-mindedness. Because it is only in this wise that you grow upwards to the truth and become stronger in it. 59. If the truth were to help you simply because you need its help, but you did not want to strive for it, then you would ask for its help simply when in danger and affliction, after which you would, however, forget it very quickly once your anxiety and your dread have disappeared again. If you did not have to strive arduously yourselves for the truth and help, then, after the help had been provided, you would, as scrupulously as before, use your unintellect and your irrationality in a criticizing wise against the truth, instead of considering it. 60. Such doing is an absolute waste of time for your short life period, through which you also endanger your future, because you do not awaken the creational in you through the effective truth, but quite the contrary. You only create hatred and war as well as unfairness, jealousy, and murder and manslaughter in yourselves and in the entire world, and get very badly out of the control of the good human nature into torture, terror, crime, pathological craving for revenge, and pathological craving for retaliation, through which unaccountability, unfairness, rightlessness, consciencelessness, and irresponsibility constantly gain the upper hand in you, as well as your pathological craving for uncontrolled offspring, which gets very badly out of the control of the good human nature into ever wilder overpopulation, thereby destroying the climate of the planet, and through which enormous quantities of life of all kinds are killed and also eradicated. 61. Truly, you human beings of Earth, it now lies alone with you to decide whether you will continue to hurry towards misery, affliction, all conceivable terrible things, and possibly your own downfall and the destruction of your world, or whether you will bethink yourselves and turn to the truth and to the creational laws and recommendations in order to follow them and to save yourselves as well as your world and its nature. Consider, you alone are responsible for the overpopulation and for all affliction and all misery, as well as for the destruction of the climate and the entire terribleness of any kind and form that runs through the entire world and humankind. All this is merely because you do not strive for the effective truth. You do not look for it, and therefore you do not find it, and you cannot live according to it or according to the true laws and recommendations of the creation, because in your thoughts you hang onto irrational belief forms and false rules, laws and recommendations of your false and invented godheads and 10 gods, and you follow their demands that are fabulated through you human beings for punishment and war against those whom you regard as your enemies. 62. You only have the choice to liberate yourselves out of your self-created entanglements and to follow the truth of the creation as well as its laws and recommendations, or to go under. 63. The choice for all things of your existence is left to you. However, consider that, whatever you decide, the consequences of your decision will determine your actions, indeed in the right and in the good as well as in the wrong and in the bad, because the causes that you create will give rise to the corresponding effects. 64. Only if you create the right causes will the effects also be right and valueful, out of which true love and harmony, as well as peace and freedom will develop for you individuals and for your entire humankind, through which all evil, each war and terror as well as all other terrible things will be nipped in the bud. 65. The right causes for the right effects are things which you can, however, only create if you go in conformity with the truth of all truth, which you must experience and live in yourselves as certainty in recognition of the reality.